After collapse of Soviet Union, all ex-communist countries turn into Wild West. Criminals become more daring. They are organized, well-armed and equipped. Murder, stealing, extortion, and rape becomes their trademark. This is one of many true stories about those criminals and brave, determined people who try to bring them to justice. In the 1990s, Russia's last small defense against the world's drug trade fell along with the Iron Curtain. Russia tried to catch up with the rest of the world where lagging behind would have been more useful, the drug business. In the fall of 1991, panic begins among drug addicts in Moscow. A new drug has appeared that not only takes you high, but kills its user after the second or third injection. Drug dealers named this drug crocodile. Every time a new drug hits the market, several important questions arise. Where does it come from, who makes it and how? With each arrested dealer, investigators move closer to answers, but not in the case with crocodile. No dealer knew the origin. Analyzing this deadly drug in the laboratory showed that there was water in the ampoules, but this water killed. The ampoules were sent to the United Nations for in-depth analysis, and after several months the laboratory confirmed that the ampoules contained drug alpha-methylfentanyl, known around the world as China White. This narcotic is 5,000 times more powerful than morphine, and in its pure form it was a poison 2,000 times more potent than potassium cyanide. A cigarette pack-sized amount of the pure substance would be enough to kill all of Moscow. This was something new in Russia. In order to prevent the disaster, investigative groups from the Federal Counterintelligence Service (FSK) and the Ministry of Internal Affairs (MVD) joined forces. The investigation team was led by one of the most experienced investigators of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Serious repression was carried out against the internal drug business. Dozens of people were arrested, entire organized groups were liquidated, but the source of the crocodile's origin was never found. It wasn't until 1992 that the first significant clue was revealed. Crocodile was coming in Russia from Azerbaijan. At the end of 1992, the surname Babayev began to figure in the investigation. His son studied medicine in Moscow. It was not difficult to find him. Umut Babayev studied at the Shechen Moscow Medical Academy. With the permission of the prosecutor, investigators started listening of Babayev's telephone conversations. From the files of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, investigators learned Latif Babayev, citizen of Azerbaijan, spent 9 years in prison, released in 1987, lives in Kiev, has private business. His phone conversations with acquaintances and relatives were insignificant, but once father asked his son to visit the dormitories of Moscow University, room 534, and meet Andy. Andy's real name was Andrei Gavrushin, a student of the Faculty of Chemistry at Moscow University. Born in 1973, student of third course. He was 17 years old, team member of the National Chemistry Olympiad. The first meeting of Andy and Babayev Jr. took place at the metro station Kamenskaya. It was filmed with a hidden camera. Everything happened like in a spy movie. Just before the train was about to depart, a package was handed over. Both men got into the train car, but when the door was about to close, one of them jumped out. It looked as they were trying hard to get away from possible followers. It was decided not to arrest the students for the time being, so as not to scare a more serious fish. Suddenly events started to develop rapidly. Babayev Sr. scheduled a meeting with Andy on January 8, 1993. Before Christmas Eve, Andy went to the suburb of Moscow, Khimkiv. Since meeting at metro, investigators were following him all the time. In the window of the apartment where Andy is staying, investigators noticed a girl working with a chemical flasks and a test tubes. Investigators could not believe that drug that made Moscow and all Russia tremble was produced in simple communal apartment. Andy and Babayev Sr. were supposed to be arrested at the time of their next meeting, but it did not happen due to coincidence. The train from Kiev was late. Babayev the elder did not meet with Andy and flew to Uzbekistan. It was decided not to proceed and postpone the detention until the next scheduled meeting on January 14. At the evening of January 14, the investigators have been continuously monitoring the suspects for 2 weeks. On January 14, Babayev Sr. and Andy met at Moscow metro station Kamenskaya. Investigators were ready to make an arrest, but suspects only talked. they didn't exchange anything. Investigators were panicking. It was useless to arrest them now because there was not enough evidence. There were only a couple of hours left until Babayev's senior departure, so it was decided in favor of detaining all three persons, Andy, Babayev Sr. and girl that lived in flat at Moscow suburb, Khimkiv. Investigators hoped that one of the suspects would confess during the detention. When Babayev Sr. came out of the place where his son lives, operation was started to simultaneously arrest everyone. In total 7 law enforcement groups were involved. Not only all 3 suspects were arrested, also searches at the Faculty of Chemistry, at flat in Khimkiv, Andy's dormitory, his girlfriend's and friends' apartments. Babayev Sr. was arrested on the way to the airport. The drug China White was not found on any of the suspects. To the surprise of investigators, girl in the window of apartment in Khimkiv was actually a boy, Andy's fellow student at the Faculty of Chemistry, Yugodkin. A whole laboratory was found in Yugodkin's apartment. And among the chemicals, a byproduct that is result of production of China White, but this was not enough evidence. It was not possible to prove participation of Yugodkin in any criminal activities. Andy denied everything during his first interrogation, but at the second one confessed in writing that produced different drugs for Babayev Sr., but not China White. Babayev denied everything, admitting only in delivering synthetic drugs to others. Arrests of several talented students of the Faculty of Chemistry followed, and almost all of them were involved in the production of drugs, but no one produced China White. Only when the graduate student of the Faculty of Chemistry, Danir Abaramov, was arrested, a chance to detain those who made China White appeared. He stated that in September of 1991, he met his friend Andrei Gavrushin, also known as Andy, and Andy told him that several of their mutual friends produced drugs on fentanyl bases. Finally, after 1.5 years of persistent investigation, it was possible to find out the location of the laboratory and the culprits. It was Alexey Fyodorov, student of the Faculty of Chemistry at Kazan University, born in 1972, member of the school's Chemistry Olympiad team, winner of the Berlin Chemistry Olympiad. Investigators were shocked to learn that curious student learned about China White and its properties from commonly accessible popular science book. Student had found it most interesting, because it was described as very difficult to detect in labs. This student, who could become a pioneer of Russian science, was the mastermind behind Russia's China White. He had developed an original synthesis formula, according to which China White could be produced at home. This formula was then used by his friend, also a talented chemist, Renat Matahov. There is a saying, curiosity kills the cat, but in this case students were already under control of organized crime. Worst prediction came true. Matahov had synthesized 600 grams of pure China White in solid form at the request of the mafia. Babayev had received only part of these goods, the other part was given to one of the criminal gangs from Kazan. Unfortunately, it was unknown to which one. This was enough to make 500,000 ampules of drug. There was no time to waste, so strictest measures were taken. War was declared on the criminal gangs of Kazan. A warning was sent through the agency of Kazanska Godfathers that if these drugs were sold, the repression will be immediate. That time, the mafia gave in. On May 24, 1993, an anonymous call was made to the State Security Service. Caller said, "What you are looking for is in the Samosarovska cemetery," and a specific grave was indicated. On the next day, drug was recovered. Volume found was enough to produce 2 tons of China White. The operation was successfully completed, the laboratory was liquidated, arrests were made, drugs were confiscated, but the investigators had nothing to celebrate. The arrested students were skilled enough to make any drugs, and there was information that criminal world was already waiting for them with open arms after their release from prison. Thank you for watching. Feel free to leave comments down below. Next story in series. Hitman who specializes on high-value targets, constantly changes appearances, and evades pursuits. He is so efficient that gets nicknamed by law enforcement
the Terminator.